Welcome back, everyone, in the Fever. And George, now we've reached this bye week in 2-5A. Everyone's got 4 games under their belt. What are some of the things that you've started to see with them?
Well, I think when you're talking about this district, I think one of the biggest surprises, obviously, that we've talked about before, is the way Odessa High is playing. They seem like nobody can stop them. You're going to have to score 50 points to beat Odessa because you're certainly not going to be able to do it defensively. They're putting up points in record numbers. And I think one of the things about that is nobody expected a guy like Bradley Marquez, just a sensational sophomore running back who just seems to be able to do everything. He returns kickoffs. He had 150 some odd yards this week. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. Just a great talent they've got there. For Coach Ron King at Odessa. Obviously, I'm a little surprised I thought Monterey would be a little better at this point. Coach James Morton is saying we still need to get some offensive consistency. I thought the way they played that first week, that they were on their way, but they really haven't seemed to, kind of take it to the next level. And maybe a little bit of surprise, I think, is Coronado. They had a lot of questions, but they've been able to plug in key guys into key holes and kind of keep going along. They've just got to shore some things up, I think, still defensively, still giving up a ton of yards and still need to get some things worked out there before, we get into the meat of the season here in a couple of weeks.
You mentioned Odessa High sitting atop those standings right now with Permian at 4-0. Monterey loses that big game to Permian, but they're sitting right back at 3-1. What's maybe not necessarily a bold prediction, but what could you see maybe coming out of this district when we head into the postseason?
Well, I think maybe the only thing we know for sure at this point, I think, is that Odessa Permian is going to win that district. I don't think, we all said that at the beginning of the season. I haven't seen anything that's going to cause me to change that. I mean, when you're looking at Odessa Permian, especially against, Monterey and the way they played, I said it before, it was like Florida and Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State is a good team. But they didn't have the talent that Florida did, in the national championship. I think Permian is the same way. I think the rest of the district has a lot of good talent, but Permian's talent is just bigger, faster, stronger, overall better. I think they're a notch ahead of everybody else. But you got some teams like Odessa who are making a big run. I think Midland is answering a lot of questions. There were a lot of skeptics about Midland going into the season, but they're sitting there, tied for the lead as well, undefeated. So, so I think it'll be interesting to see. I think this next couple of weeks you've got some key games. When we come out of the bye, Midland and Monterey are playing each other. Odessa and Odessa Permian are playing each other. So I think those are 2 key games that you're going to have to watch here in the next couple of weeks. And once those 2 get through, then I think maybe you can start to see a little bit, of how these things might shape out.
Maybe not the biggest disappointment you've seen so far, but what's something that maybe shocked you a little bit, not necessarily as a surprise, but the teams that have moved down in the standings right now?
I thought Tascosa would probably be a little better, and not saying they aren't better, but they played, they played some tough guys. They've played Amarillo, and they've played Odessa, or they've played Odessa High. I believe it's Odessa High or Odessa Permian, one of the two. I thought Heath Parker's team, I thought was back on the rise a little bit. I thought they would be a little bit better. I thought, after seeing Coronado the first couple weeks, I really honestly thought they would be, right there at undefeated. I think the loss to Odessa, really kind of stunned them. And then, like we said before, I think, this loss this last week to Midland Lee is really going to hurt them down the stretch when you start talking about tiebreakers and things like that. And, with 10 teams, who knows how tiebreakers are going to play out in that district. So I think probably those 2 between Tascosa and Coronado the last couple of weeks, not so much the whole season, but the last couple of weeks, probably, the 2 biggest disappointments I've seen so far.
And one team that's been a nice surprise to watch so far, Friendship, traveling to Hobbs this weekend. They've gotten over 200 yards rushing in every game they've played so far, but now Tyler Lloyd's starting to open up that passing game a little more. Who do you see coming out of the top on this one? Well,
I still think, when you're talking about 4-4A, I still think you're talking about, 2 teams in Friendship and Abilene Cooper. And, Abilene Cooper is sitting there at 2-2, but look at who their losses are. They lost to 5A Garland. They lost to a crosstown rival Abilene, which is ranked number 5, number 6 in the state in 5A. So, I don't think that Cooper has shown us anything to make us doubt that they won't be there at the end. But I think maybe now what we've seen out of Friendship, the first 4 weeks, a big win over a top team in 3A in Abilene Wiley, and a very good Randall team. I think maybe Friendship has got to start feeling a little bit better about their chances. Hereford, I'm a little surprised that they've kind of slipped off, a little bit, but I still think they're going to be there at the end. And then I think, you're talking about Big Spring earlier and what they've been able to do. I would look for Big Spring to be there at the end. So I think right now that might be about a 4-team race. But I think the 2 lead horses still are Friendship and Abilene Cooper.
All right, in 2A, Shallow taking on Idalou in a big 3-2A matchup. And, when we looked at this game at the beginning of the season, we said, okay, here's Morris versus Reagan. Here's these two offenses going at it. Now it's a little bit different story heading into this game.
Yeah, it is. Shallow obviously had the injury to Morris. I'm sure he's still probably about 3 or 4 weeks away from getting back. And then Idalou has just picked up where they left off this week. You're talking about a big rivalry game every year. Shallow and Idalou, a lot of times you can, I hate to use the old cliche, but throw the records out the window because something always seems to happen. But this year, being at Idalou, the way Idalou's playing, I don't see any surprises this week. I think Idalou takes care of business this week.
All right, and, of course, the game you'll be seeing, Denver City and Abernathy. Denver City's showing a lot of offense so far this year. What do you see happening in that game?
This, I think, is going to be one of those games, in this district that when you look at the end, is going to be the one that determines maybe second place, third place, and maybe even has some ramifications beyond that. Because Abernathy was my dark horse going into the season, but I really like the way, like you said, Denver City has played well, especially offensively. Colt McDowell at quarterback has just been outstanding for the Mustangs. And so this is going to be a very, very key game for both teams. And the winner of this one, I think, has the inside track for the next 5-6 weeks of being able to challenge Idalou and Littlefield for that district title, and definitely has the inside track for one of those 3 playoff spots.
All right, Post taking on Roosevelt. Here's two teams just trying to keep their season going right now in the midst of it.
Yeah, this is another big rivalry game between Post and Roosevelt. Always a big game. Usually comes down at the end of the season and usually determines a playoff spot in this district, but it's early in the season this year. I like what Coach Greg Pointer has done, coming over from Muleshoe with that offense and defense and putting it in there at Roosevelt. But Post has been playing very well. It'll be a very interesting game, but given, the way both teams I think are pretty equal, and Roosevelt being at home, I think I'm going to go with the Eagles in this one this week.
Now, Littlefield traveling to Slayton. We've seen a lot of things out of the Wildcats, but could we see something surprising from the Tigers this week, or is this going to be Littlefield taking out another game?
Yeah, I got to think that this is pretty much maybe one of Littlefield's breeds games in this district. Slayton's obviously a good team. I just don't think they have the talent and the capabilities, to be able to control the game, especially with the running game. Littlefield, we've said, a lot like Idalou, lines up and just runs the ball at you. And I think they'll go into Slayton this week and do the same thing. I like the Wildcats. All
right, Morton traveling to Sundown to take on the Roughnecks. Maybe Sundown's back on track after a couple of hiccup games, but what do you see happening in this one?
Yes, we wondered about Sundown and, what was going on with them. But, they came back against Alton and put up a lot of points, got them a big win. Now they host Morton. Morton coming in, I'm sure, off a very disappointing loss to Nazareth last week. Nazareth's a good team, but I'm sure Morton was looking for a little bit better, coming out of that. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Indians do going on the road and faring well. This is going to be a very competitive game, I think, from start to finish. But given that Sundown kind of got back on track this last week and this game being at home, I think the Roughnecks will continue to build, and I like them in this one.
All right, Georgia's picks for Week 4. Friendship taking out Hobbs, Idalou over Shallowater, Abernathy over Denver City, Roosevelt over Post, Littlefield over Slayton, and Sundown taking out Morton. And that's all the time we have this week here on Football Fever. Tune in right here to LISD TV and LoneStarVarsity.com for all your news, highlights, scores, and more. You can email questions and comments to George and I at sports@LubbockOnline.com. For George Watson, I'm Travis Cram. We'll catch you next week right here. Catch the Fever.